Stossel.
Another year, government got bigger. As usual, it grew faster than inflation. It almost always grows faster than inflation. It has to grow, say the politicians. There's so much we need to do. Cut spending? No, we can't do that. The budget's already cut to the bone. What? They spent nearly $4 trillion this year. That's not bone, that's fat. Tonight we look back at some of my attempts to tell the truth. And the truth is that the budget is so crammed with junk. It reminds me of this creepy TV show.
Hoarders. People whose lives are swallowed up by piles of their possessions.
That describes Washington, D.C. They just keep adding junk, and they never throw anything out. When President Obama ran for office, he said he'd take out the garbage.
I'm not a Democrat who believes that we can or should defend every government program just because it's there. There's some that don't work.
But politicians always say they'll get rid of the waste. Then, once in power, they spend more, as he has. And they go along with their colleagues' ridiculous spending. It's a reason I hate politicians. Well, not all of them. There is one senator who does want to clean the waste out of Washington. Every year, his office puts out this waste book. It details stupid subsidies like the $10 million you spent to partner the National Guard with Superman.
In Part 4, we're going to examine the connection between Jim Jones, the Man of Steel movie, and the National Guard.
$10 million for that. Also, the National Endowment for Humanities gave $1 million of your money to something called the Popular Romance Project. The goal: study the influence of romance through novels and film.
As far as a woman and a man is concerned, I like to read about passion.
What makes love love?
It's a love story. Who doesn't want a love story with a happy ending?
Me? I don't want one when taxpayers are forced to pay for things like that video. The lonely senator who fights the garbage is Tom Coburn. Senator, thank you for doing that. The Pentagon destroyed $7 billion of weapons that they could have shipped home from Iraq and Afghanistan.
That just shows you the inefficiency of the Pentagon. It costs more to ship it over there than it's worth. Why did we have the excess supply that we had?
The National Science Foundation spent $250,000 to study American attitudes toward the filibuster?
Yeah, isn't that really important? Maybe some of the things that you might see might be something the government might do sometime, but not when we have a $640 billion deficit. And maybe we ought to be returning the money to the taxpayers rather than wasting it on frivolous things like that.
And having politicians paying people to study the filibuster sounds like Congressman self-dealing.
Oh, it is. There's no question it was.
Sadly, Senator Coburn retires from Congress soon. We'll miss him. We'll have to bust the politicians' myths without him. The political class is so wrong about so much. Here's one widely believed myth: sweatshops and child labor are cruel and must be banned by government.
Oh no, that boy's hands are bleeding. Child labor is evil. This is a video game made for a so-called educational TV channel.
And what education do people get? Some obvious truths. Sweatshops are cruel. Workers are overworked in dangerous conditions. American companies ignore the abuses because they make money. And that means child workers are victims of our fashion whims. This is what many Americans believe and many are taught. And therefore the answer: close the sweatshops down, ban them in America, and demand that other countries ban child labor. It's just a basic human rights issue. Who would argue with that? Economist Ben Powell, for one, he just wrote a book called Out of Poverty, in which he says if we really want to help people climb out of poverty, we ought to let children work. That sounds awful.
Child labor might be awful, but but prohibiting it is an awful lot worse. Listen, we don't make people better off when we take away their least bad option. Children only work in these sweatshops because their families are desperately poor and trying to feed, clothe, and shelter their family. If you ban sweatshops, you don't get rid of that poverty. You just eliminate that one option they have that makes it not quite as bad as it would be otherwise.
So no laws against it?
Well, when we were developing, we had virtually no laws against it, and the process of economic development took care of it itself. In the United States, we didn't have a national child labor law until 1938. The child labor laws followed the economic development, and this completely makes sense from a political economy standpoint if you think about it. Labor had agitated for rules for years. Big business lobbied against it. Once the process of competition raised standards, including no more child labor, well, then businesses didn't lobby against it anymore, and governments adopted laws.
Well, here's an example of how the Western media typically cover the child labor outrage.
Where the heat is 1800 degrees Celsius and small children are carrying the molten glass. Look at this small boy.
And who is at fault? Big corporations and free trade.
We think more free trade and more sort of opening up of markets for big U.S. corporations is actually hurting working people all over the world.
What world are they looking at, John? So
this is what people believe.
Recently, 500 million people have escaped extreme poverty in China. In pure numbers, this is the greatest reduction in poverty in human history. It's going on all around us. And it's this process of trade and development that is doing it. The problem is...
It's the same globalization that they hate has lifted people out of poverty.
It's exactly what's lifted. If I gave you a list of sweatshop countries in 1960, that list would be Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, all countries that in a generation did what took us over 100 years in the United States to do, is grow from pre-industrial to something that looks like post-sweatshop first world standards of living.
Another myth. Everyone should go to college. The cost of college is now absurd. In some places it's $50,000, $60,000 per year.
Over the past 30 years, inflation was 160%. We're upset that health care costs grew more, 400%. But college tuition rose 750%.
Why would that be? Because of government handouts. As government increased financial aid, colleges raised tuition. The president seems to understand the relationship.
We can't just keep on subsidizing skyrocketing tuition.
Right. Government subsidizes high tuition by throwing money at schools. But what's weird is in that same speech where the president said, we can't keep subsidizing skyrocketing tuition, he also says this.
My administration is increasing federal student aid so more students can afford college.
Hello? Doesn't he see the disconnect? I think he does, but he still panders for votes by giving your money away. He also told young people, student loans, don't you worry about it, we'll take care of it.
Let's tell another 1 million students that when they graduate, they will be required to pay only 10% of their income on student loans, and all of their debt will be forgiven.
Sure, free money, debt's forgiven. You know, it's not the politicians' own money. The only good news that I see is that some students have gotten wise to the scam. Belle Knox did. She's a sophomore at Duke. Belle, we shouldn't forgive all college loans?
If we forgive student debt, the same thing that happened with the mortgage crisis is going to happen, and
creates a moral hazard. It invites people to behave badly. I'm glad you get this concept. And the audience should know Belle may be more knowledgeable about college costs than most students because she became a controversial news story after it was revealed that she works as a porn star to pay for Duke.
$60,000 a year. So she's, woohoo. So she's here to tell us why she chose this route to make the money.
So why did you?
I was 18 years old, and I didn't want to be saddled with $240,000 plus in loans by the time I graduated from college. I didn't view that as a sustainable way to live my life, and I didn't see how that would help me in the future. I only saw it holding me back.
When that interview first aired, many Fox viewers objected, saying, I shouldn't condone women enslaving themselves in the sex trade. But I don't agree with them. Belle isn't enslaving herself. She chooses to use her body to make money. She's an adult. Should be her choice. Finally, another big government myth pushed this year was that the poor suffer because of rising inequality. The rich take more of the pie, and that means everyone else has less.
Are you rich?
No.
What would it take for you to think of yourself as rich?
100 grand a year?
Maybe $1 million?
500,000.
400,000?
Maybe $1 million.
Very different concepts of what it means to be rich. No one in Times Square who I asked said they were rich, and yet most were tourists who had spent a lot of money just to be in New York City. So what does rich mean in America? Who better to ask than radio host Dave Ramsey? He's spent years talking to people about money. Dave, you say Americans are richer than they know.
If your household income is $34,000 a year or more, you're in the top 1% of income earners in the world. And so by definition, most of us are rich.
I think what grosses some people out in America is that some people are so much richer than others.
I have that same tug at my heart because I've spent my life, devoted my life to helping people win with money, and I want to see folks win with money. But I have figured out that just like a golf coach, everybody's not going to be Tiger Woods, or like a football coach, everybody's not going to be Peyton Manning.
But wouldn't it be better for America if government would do things just to level the playing field, bring the rich closer to the poor, help the poor, take from the rich, give to the poor?
If we decide with moral outrage that we want to react to this unfairness, the only answer to that is the loss of freedom.
What do you think were the big myths of the year? You can tell us if you follow me on Twitter at FBN Stossel and use that hashtag Stossel2014. Or like my Facebook page so you can post on my wall. Next, some ways the world got better in 2014. We're back with some of my favorite segments from this year. Watching the news, it's easy to get depressed about our future. Cable TV hosts claim crime is up and kids waste too much time texting and tweeting. It's going to weaken America. Weaker America?
Absolutely.
Video games?
Look, if you are devoting your life to the internet, as so many young people are, all right, you are not learning about the world. You are not learning personal interactions. You're just tweeting and texting your life away over trivial things.
Was this better? This is what people did on the train years ago.
They read papers.
They aren't communicating either.
No, but they're reading about the world, are they not?
But these kids are communicating with each other.
About their socks.
Please, the kids will be fine. In England, journalist Matt Ridley was quicker than I, and much quicker than Bill, to realize that the media's dire predictions were almost always wrong. Remember what the experts said in the 70s?
The population explosion was unstoppable, famine was inevitable, pesticides were going to shorten our lives, bird flu was going to kill us, the ice age was coming back, acid rain was killing forests, all these, the desert was advancing, the Y2K computer bug, all these things were going to go wrong. And that's what everybody said to me about the future. And so I was kind of surprised when I grew up to find that actually things had been getting better, much better for most people most of the time.
Some people call this pessimism porn or fear porn. It sells in the media. People want to be scared.
It sounds kind of wiser to talk about what might go wrong than to talk about what might go right.
One example of that is the hysteria over fossil fuels and global warming destroying the planet. I think the globe may be warming, and maybe partly because of man. I'm not a climate change skeptic. Climate changes. I'm a climate catastrophe skeptic. So is Alex Epstein, who came in the show to defend the use of those hated fossil fuels.
We're actually 50 times safer from the climate than we were 80 years ago because we have the technology that's powered by fossil fuels.
And the wealth, so we burn more energy than anybody else, and our air is cleaner.
Right. We always have to look at what's the big picture, what's the alternative.
Solar.
Well, there's such a thing as an imaginary alternative, but if we look at the alternatives that have existed in reality, we used to burn wood and have indoor air pollution. We used to burn coal inside. Now we have decentralized power plants. We have all these amazing things. And it's nothing against wind and solar if those were actually decently performing industries. We just want the best energy, and right now that's overwhelmingly fossil fuels.
A few years ago when Europe was caught in the frenzy over carbon emissions, the British government paid for this commercial.
There was once a land where the weather was very, very strange. There were awful heat waves in some parts, and in others, terrible storms and floods. Some places could even disappear under the sea, and it was the children of the land who'd have to live with the horrible consequences. The grown-ups realized they had to do something.
Is there a happy ending?
The ad then leads you to a government website that tells you how you can reduce your carbon footprint. So what's wrong with that?
Well, two things. First of all, that we're talking about it as noble to use less energy, that's like saying it's noble to have less money. No, you might misuse energy, you might be inefficient, but more is always better because energy is the capacity to be productive. So that's a positive thing, so it should never be an ideal. Now, if they say, well, the fossil fuel industry, they're making our climate more dangerous, that's the other fallacy here because the story is the exact opposite of this little propaganda fairy tale.
Finally, even though I bash the media, there is some good news to report. We have more choice. The editor of Mediaite came on to argue that the media is much better now. But people say, oh, the golden age of media was Cronkite, Murrow, and they were just down the middle.
Sure, we get misty-eyed thinking about those golden days when there was
Maybe
one
you
or
do.
two. Well, I wasn't around for it. I know, babyface. But you know, there were 2 or 3 guys giving you the news on a nightly basis, and Cronkite closed with "That's the way it is." And it's nice to have that authoritative voice, but it's better to have choice. The market responded. There was no act of government or God. It was just, you know, the market responded, and we got Drudge Report, we got Fox News, we got talk radio, which, I mean, there's problems with all of this, but the market is continually innovating and creating new niches in the media.
Ted Koppel, host of Nightline. In the Washington Post, he wrote that the success of Fox and MSNBC is a source of sadness for me. It's not good for the Republic. This is to journalism what Bernie Madoff was to investment. Madoff told his customers what they wanted to hear, and by the time they learned the truth, their money was gone. Bill O'Reilly interviewed Koppel about his complaints.
You think that we've corrupted the sanctity of fair news coverage?
I think it's made it difficult, if not impossible, for decent men and women in Congress, on Capitol Hill, to reach across the aisle and find compromise.
Some people might not think that stalemate is actually a bad thing. Maybe
I don't think we libertarians want them to be stalemated.
We want them to keep arguing.
But we have differences.
Yeah, and I mean, the problem is people think this creates an echo chamber where you have lots of people only reading the news that they want to read. And that is a problem, but I think...
And that's his Bernie Madoff point, telling people what they want to hear.
Right, but even in that compartmentalization, I guess you can call it, even in that, you're getting good reporting. Like, you know, you can trust somebody like Glenn Greenwald, who is... He is an out-and-out civil libertarian. He makes his opinions very known, but his reporting won him a Pulitzer.
Coming up, more good news. This year brought new ways to get someone to cook for us, and more. As usual this year, governments passed thousands of new laws. More, it's always more. New laws piled on a million encrusted old laws. The good news is that this year some entrepreneurs found ways to dodge the oppressive state. Some, like Uber and Airbnb, just ignored the laws, and by the time sleepy regulators noticed and tried to regulate these innovators out of business, the companies already had millions of customers. The customers showed up to tell the politicians, don't take away my ride sharing or room sharing. These innovations are better. And the politicians backed down. Sometimes. I assume you know about Uber and Airbnb, but what about this idea? A new way to dine with strangers in the comfort of someone's home.
This website, eatwith.com. It allows cooks, here they call them hosts, to connect with strangers who'd like to meet new people at a dinner party.
Thanks for having us. This is so nice.
Hila says her previous dinner parties led to lasting friendships.
We just had the most entertaining conversations, and at the end, you know, we just couldn't stop hugging one another.
Hila would have done this years ago, but she couldn't afford that.
When I would host dinner parties for friends, it secretly would have been really nice if every time I threw a dinner party, I could actually, you know, cover the $200 or however much it costs.
Thanks to eatwith.com, at this brunch, every guest paid $39.
Cheers, guys. Cheers.
Chocolate.
Seems good to me. One more good thing made possible by the internet and the power of reputation. And in this case, also by Guy Michelin, who founded the website Eat With. How'd you come up with this idea?
Through a travel experience. I traveled to Greece, and after many tourist traps, I happened to be invited to a local family. And it was such a profound and amazing experience that when I back home, I said, okay, let's share this moment with millions around the world and just build this platform called Eat With.
And with the platform, people can rate the home and the cook and say, I had a good experience.
Right, so we see the trust and safety as very fundamental to what we're doing. So we created all those mechanisms such as rating, reviews. We're actually vetting all of our hosts also. We gave the host the ability to reject invitation that's coming in from a guest if they don't feel safe and
they check their Facebook and
exactly,
queasy.
Exactly. Everything is put together just so both sides would feel comfortable, safe, and that there is trust.
And she charged $39. Other people charge less or more?
Yeah, it's a free marketplace. You can charge whatever you want.
Eatwith.com is now offered in 35 countries. So far, the regulators have left them alone. Another industry that's fighting government's suffocating rules is the gaming industry. America banned betting on sports and internet gaming in most of the country, but Americans found ways to bet anyway.
Want to play blackjack? Dealer, I'll take another card. Another. Yippee, I won.
I could have also played poker, a roulette game, a stupid slot machine game. All those games are playable because this site is not in America. It may be in Ireland or Panama. I don't know where it is. I don't much care. But these sites are growing. There are more of them all the time. How do they take bets from Americans when other sites were stopped? Well, here to explain that is Naomi Brockwell of the New York Bitcoin Center. So these things somehow thrive because people pay in Bitcoins?
Well, yeah, essentially. The way that the ban on internet gambling is enforced is that the government actually targets the intermediaries, the financial institutions that actually process the payments to the online gambling sites. And what's amazing about Bitcoin is that it's a peer-to-peer currency, so it doesn't actually use any of these financial institutions. The gambler can actually, communicate and make payments directly to the casino, and there's very little that the government can do to stop these transactions. I guess that they could try to shut down different sites, use diplomatic pressure, but there's such an incredible market for online gambling. I think 50 to 60% of all Bitcoin transactions are actually made within gambling sites. So
these
there's a
sites
huge market.
depend on Bitcoin payments.
Well, that's it. Bitcoin is an incredible technology that is facilitating these sites, and it's actually making gambling a lot safer for the people who are doing the gambling.
Coming up, police, privacy, polygamy, the war between the state and individual freedom. Do you own your body? I would think in a free country that you do, as long as you don't hurt somebody else, that you're free to do with your body what you want. But you can't in America, or in most other countries for that matter. The state decided that some ways you may use your body are so dangerous or immoral that they must be banned. I don't see why. For example, every state bans plural marriage. Gay marriage is now more accepted, but why stop there? If you own your body, why can't you marry 2 people or 6 people? I invited a polygamist family onto the show.
Somebody asked me one time how we deal with the gender inequality of polygamy, and I said, well, we try to give Joe a break now and then because he can tend to get picked on a day when we're all...
He's kind of outnumbered.
Yeah.
If there's something that he's, done to another wife, or there's some difference there, it's not like I'm going to go, oh, good, they're having a fight now, I'm going to go in for my turn. It's not like that. It's like we are really looking out for one another and looking out for the whole.
Right. We're really supportive of one another's relationships that way. And I hear a lot of women, in our community that are monogamous, and they joke a lot about wishing they had a sister wife for this or that reason, whether it's companionship, helping with the children,
And everybody shares help with the children. It's a community.
Yes.
Which used to be illegal. And you have grandparents who were prosecuted, jailed.
Yes.
Yes.
All of our grandfathers were in prison. We feared the state and the government.
I didn't grow up with the idea that police officers were friendly, and so that kind of fear that we grew up with, I knew was not healthy, and we had to change that.
And a federal judge in Utah recently did change it. He ruled that this no cohabitation law was illegal. You still, bigamy or trigamy, I don't know what it is with you, is still illegal. But as long as you only say, I'm married to one, who are you married to officially?
I'm legally married to Alina, so getting multiple marriage licenses is still illegal, but now I can have as many consensual relationships as I want, which is all we ever wanted, is to be decriminalized.
The most destructive limit on what adults can do with their own bodies is the ban on recreational drugs. America jails a higher percentage of our population than any other country in the world, mostly because of the drug law. This year, Colorado and Washington legalized marijuana, but every other drug is absolutely illegal. Few supporters of the drug war want to debate me about this, but some, like former Congressman Allen West, were willing. West says when it comes to things like drugs, you've got to make sure there's a level of personal responsibility. When you say personal responsibility, how is it personal responsibility if government bans something?
Well, that's because we have people that don't want to accept that personal responsibility. Look,
right?
You know,
I was
the designated driver for most of my second lieutenant buddies. Their choice was that, hey, Alan, you know, I want to go out, I want to have a good time. Will you take care?
Your choice was to drink.
Absolutely.
And if somebody else wants to snort cocaine, why do you want to stop them?
Well, I think that that's a detriment to the society. I mean, you know, what is the gain? What is the long-term gain of snorting cocaine? Now, I would
people want to do it. Don't they own their own bodies?
Okay, then if you want to do it, then do it in your own sphere. But when you are now coming
You'd be fine with that being legal?
I mean, you got it here in New York City. I know doggone well that there are executives, there are people. We just saw the film Wolf of Wall Street and what he was doing. Now, if you're an adult, if you can make that decision, you can be responsible for that decision, then fine. But I don't want to.
What do you mean fine? It's illegal. You would lock people up for that.
I don't want to be the one responsible. I don't want to be the one that suffers the consequences of John Stossel out high on cocaine and then I lose my life because of it. That's why we have laws.
Wow, the argument goes in circles. Few libertarians support drug use. We just say it's a matter best left to adults to decide for themselves, and that the laws against drugs do much more harm than the drugs. As Lao Tzu said, the greater the number of laws, the more thieves and robbers there will be. Eric Garner was killed when police moved to arrest him for breaking the law. But what law? A rule against selling loose cigarettes. That's a popular business only because New York state government is too big and it levies huge taxes on cigarettes. It's not the police's fault that America has too many laws, but the police are special. We give them the power to legally use force. That's why it's good we have cameras that record what the police do, and when no civilian cameras are around, when the police wear cameras. I interviewed a police chief and sergeant from New Jersey who were among the first to try them. They like them.
We owe that to our community, our customers. We should be providing them with the best service, and in return, we got to have that level of transparency, that we'll have the collaboration, that we work together as one.
And as it turns out, protection for yourselves too. You sent us this example that you say shows why police need cameras.
What happened? Stay. What's wrong? Huh? What happened to you?
The video shows one of your officers approaching a man with a bloody face. The man's confused, combative.
Stop. No, you need to sit down.
Your officer eventually tackles him and cuffs him.
Sit down now.
So this protects police because somebody might have accused you of blooding his face.
Correct. In the past, we've had them excessive force complaints or demeanor complaints where without the ability to video and audio record, it was a he said, she said. So with this is a classic example of we immediately looked at the video and it showed exactly what the officer saw and how he acted, which was in conformance with our policies and procedures.
And Aaron, you mind wearing this thing? It's sort of heavy and
Yeah, yeah, it might be the lightest thing that we do wear, so I don't mind at all.
Your fellow officers complain?
All the feedback that I've gotten from them has been positive.
Coming up, 2 wonderful gifts I gave myself this year, and some medical innovations that might save your life. This year, we learn more about the amazing 3D printer. This new gun is featured in the current issue of Reason magazine. Lots of people worry about risks of things like printable guns, but everyone's thrilled about printers making new body parts. I talked to Dr. Kevin Campbell about printed skin and kidneys. Printing organs?
Exactly. It's amazing technology. It uses the same technology as an inkjet printer, but instead of ink, we have a matrix of stem cells and other organic compounds, and the computer generates this 3-dimensional image that's a living organ. This could solve so many problems in medicine with organ shortages for heart transplants, kidney transplants, and the like. This has even been accomplished already in children born without a windpipe, and there's been successful 3-dimensional printed tracheas that are implanted in these children, and these children are doing well now. We'll be able to serve patients who normally may die waiting on a transplant list.
Which is about 18 people a day, most of them waiting for kidneys.
That's exactly right.
And Wake Forest, where you went to school, researchers figured out how to print new skin cells onto burn wounds using 3D printers. What squirts out instead of ink are different kinds of skin cells. They only need a patch of skin 1/10 the size of the burn to grow enough skin cells to print skin.
Before, burn victims would have to have skin grafts, and these would be large surgeries where your own skin was harvested from other locations in your body. So then you have multiple wounds that are at risk for infection. If we can print skin to cover these burn victims, I think that plastic surgery and burn type medicine is really going to leap forward.
Well, people are thrilled about that. Many get squeamish when I point out that science will also soon allow us to design babies. It will happen. Parents will select genes to increase the odds that their baby is healthy, smart, maybe a good athlete or a musician. Already, doctors help parents choose their baby's gender. And they could do more. Things you could do, but you choose not to do are eye color, hair color, skin tone, athletic ability, height.
Yes, these are among the different things that we're able to do. In addition to predicting alcoholism, predicting drug addiction, predicting sexual deviation. There's a lot of different things. Problems like Down syndrome, Patau syndrome, Edwards syndrome, Turner syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome. I mean, there's a lot of genetic diseases. These diseases have all been predicted by amniocentesis for 35, 40, even 50 years. It's just that now, instead of having to wait until mom's 4 months pregnant to find the disease, we can find the disease before she's ever pregnant.
Another medical innovation may soon make you happier. Dr. Paul Zak researches oxytocin, the same chemical our bodies release when we hug someone.
Who wants a hug? She wants a hug.
My producer, Ricky Ratliff, went to Times Square to try her own hug experiment, which I'll get to in a bit. Dr. Zak researches oxytocin because it helps people cooperate.
We were wondering why prosperity lives in some countries, not others, and so we began studying the role of trust. And to really understand that, we wanted to get a biological basis for why we trust strangers.
And we trust strangers because of a certain chemical in our body?
It functions to cause us to reciprocate, almost always. You're nice to me, I'm nice to you. It's essentially the biological basis for the golden rule.
And so by hugging people, people release more of this hormone oxytocin, which also makes people happier.
Happier, healthier, reduces stress, improves the immune system, and promotes cooperation without anybody telling us we have to.
Now, my producer did get full frontal hugs from dozens of strangers. I was surprised that very few turned her down. Some people ran to her.
Oh, she's running. Oh, she's running. Oh, she's running. We're doing this. So I'm in the middle of my hug experiment, and I'm probably about 40 hugs in. I've hugged men, I've hugged women, I've hugged children. The men I've hugged, they hugged me a little too tightly. If my dad's watching, he's not going to appreciate this. Oh, this guy's coming in. He's going in. He's going in for the kill. He's going in for. Oh.
I feel better.
I feel fantastic. Maybe Dr. Love is onto something.
Data show that this makes people happy, the hug, but to do it scientifically, oxytocin, how?
So we infuse it into the nose, and it gets into the brain after about an hour, and then we could show this causal relationship between oxytocin and these positive social behaviors like trust, charity, generosity, and empathy for others. Do you want to try?
Sure.
All right.
So you have this is why you're wearing the white coat.
That's right.
OSHA requires it?
I'm required to wear a white coat, and I'm going to take 5 little puffs, and you take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Big breath. Good. Again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is. Big breath. Okay, one more round trip. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Big breath.
The result? I felt nothing. No extra happiness. But in fairness, Zach usually gives people a bigger dose. Coming up, some ridiculous things I did this year.
Except, whoa, I have to cover diet. Hi, I'm Uncle Sam.
When we wrote that, America was... Several times this year, I humiliated myself by putting on costumes. I do it because what we report is often complex or abstract. I don't often cover today's news. In that show, I was trying to show how the founders created a constitution that allowed Americans to create prosperity. Why did that happen here? I say largely because of me and my colleagues. Because we wrote a constitution that said there will be limits to government. Yeah, that was then. Now it seems like there are no limits. We're drowning in law. But how do I illustrate that? I know, spider webs. Help, I'm strangling here. I want to create something new, build something, invent something, but I'm drowning in thousands and thousands of regulations. How do I illustrate people's fears about robots taking over our jobs?
I'm John Stossel 2.0. I retain more research, ask better questions, and I'm more charismatic than Stossel 1.0.
And no prop is too stupid for me to use. How do I make the point that Congress needs to make big cuts in spending? The scissors, big scissors. Then, late in the month of March, so now that spring is sprung, let's clean out government. Any gimmick to make the point. After the President's State of the Union speech, I get out the bunting and podium to say what he ought to have said. I cannot imagine what I was thinking when I pushed Obamacare. I can wish, can't I? And it's fun to pretend to be the president and pander for applause by promoting sensible policies. Let's legalize drugs and end the futile and violent drug war. Finally, I spent weeks trying to figure out how to illustrate one of the sleaziest parts of Obamacare, risk corridors. What the heck is a risk corridor? It's an obscure insurance company term that the administration used to disguise Obamacare's bailouts for health insurance companies. It's how he got big insurance to support his scheme. He guaranteed him a profit with your money. So how do I explain risk corridors? I know. I'll be a rich businessman. Hi, I'm Fat Cat, health insurance company boss. And to portray the government handing him your tax money but not calling it a bailout, we'll call it risk corridors. You know, whenever there's risk, Uncle Sam will race down a corridor with lots of your money and give it to companies that the politicians want to please. Here, have some tax money. That's what your government does with your money. But let's not end this show on a sour note. Yeah, the government takes our money and our freedom, but in spite of that, Americans keep inventing cool new things that make our lives better. Here are 2 Christmas gifts that I gave myself this year.
Introducing Spotify.
A world of music.
Whatever you want.
Whenever you want.
I used to wait hours for the song I liked to come on the radio. Then we got cassettes and CDs and downloads, but they cost money. Now Spotify gives me any song I want right now for free. Yes, there are commercials, but no commercials if I pay $10 a month. I love it. Even more, I love Waze. Have you heard of that? It's a new navigation system. A few years ago, we got GPS that guides us and keeps us from getting lost, and that was good. But now, thanks to this free download, I know exactly how to drive there and almost exactly when I'll get there. I can relax. I no longer obsess about whether I should get off the highway now and take 3rd Avenue or stay on the highway. The Waze computer filters information from thousands of other drivers to tell me exactly what I need to know.
You'll always know where you're going. Community alerts for accidents, hazards, and traffic let you know when there's something to watch out for. Waze, outsmarting traffic together.
Yes, it does outsmart traffic, and it's completely free. Happy New Year. I can't wait to see what innovators bring us in 2015. It's good to live in America. That's Stossel's show tonight. He'll be back this time next week.